A poor tailor stands in the shadow of a silent forest, his heartbeat thundering as he stares at the giant girl everyone fears. Yet he alone sees the loneliness hidden in her trembling eyes. While villagers whisper about danger and doom, he noted her torn dress fluttering like a wounded memory, and something inside him refuses to turn away. He dares to believe she deserves kindness, not fear. So he begins sewing a white dress, meant to restore her dignity, unaware that every stitch pulls him deeper into a fate far bigger than himself. Night after night he works in secret, while strange. Sounds echo through the trees and rumors spread of warriors marching toward the village. By the time the dress gleams in his hands, destiny has already begun to shift, and neither he nor the world knows that his single act of courage will draw every warrior, every whisper, and every fear to one unforgettable moment. A quiet village rests under wide mountains, but peace never truly touches the people because a huge ragged girl often wanders near the fields, moving with heavy steps that shake the ground. Her torn clothes hang like forgotten shadows, and every time she appears, mothers pull their children inside while farmers abandon their tools and hide behind fences. No one dares look into her lonely face, choosing fear over understanding, convinced she brings danger even though she is never harmed. And John. In this village lives a young tailor with gentle eyes and a calm heart, a boy who watches the world differently. While others see a monster, he sees a lost soul wrapped in pain and silence. He notices how she lowers her head as if carrying a lifetime of rejection, and something in her sadness calls to him, stirring a courage he never knew he had. The tailor feels a strange heaviness settle inside him as he watches the giant girl move farther into the forest, her steps slow, her shoulders shaking as if the weight of the whole world presses down on her. He follows at a careful distance, not out of fear, but out of a quiet concern he cannot ignore. And when she slips behind a cluster of tall trees, he pauses, unsure if approaching her is wise, yet unable to turn back because something in her trembling posture calls to him more loudly than any warning ever could. He edges forward until he catches sight of her sinking to the ground, burying her face in her hands while soft cries echo through the branches, each broken sound carrying a lifetime of humiliation and rejection. Her towering figure trembles like a lost child, and the tailor feels his heart twist at the sight, for he realizes she is not dangerous, but deeply wounded, abandoned by a world that never tried to understand her. Her ripped dress hangs in shreds around her, threads dangling like forgotten pieces of a life she never had the chance to live. And in that moment he understands that her pain is not just loneliness, but the constant reminder that she has never been welcomed anywhere. He takes a breath, steadying the fear that rises not because of her size, but because he worries he might frighten her even more if he steps too quickly. So he inches closer, letting the dry leaves beneath his feet rustle, just enough to warn her without alarming her. She lifts her head slightly, startled, and wipes her tears with the back of her hand, her eyes glassy with confusion when she sees him standing there, small and fragile compared to her towering frame. She braces herself as if expecting another insult, another cruel whisper, another moment of being treated like a creature instead of a person. And the tailor's chest tightens, because he realizes she has no shield left to protect her. He speaks softly, careful with every word, his voice steady but warm, telling her that he saw her sadness and only wanted to make sure she was safe. And although she flinches at first, something in his gentle tone slows her breathing. Eh? Capes, his hands visible, palms open, showing he carries no weapon, no threat, only a fragile courage born from empathy. And he feels the air shift as the forest around them grows strangely still, as if listening to the moment that might change everything. He notices the dirt smeared across her arms, the faded bruises from accidentally brushing against tree trunks while trying to hide, the way she curls her fingers into the torn cloth around her waist, as if trying to hold the last bit of dignity she has left, and he realizes she has spent her whole life shrinking despite her size. He steps closer, his heart pounding, but his voice remains calm while he tells her she deserves clothes that do not shame her, fabric that reflects the person, says Insid, not the monstrous image villagers have painted in their fear. She looks at him with disbelief, her breath catching as if no one has ever spoken to her with sincerity, and he feels the weight of her silence press against him like a question she is too afraid to ask. He kneels slowly to show respect, not fear, and studies the torn cloth with a thoughtful gaze, because he already knows what he wants to create for her. Something pure, something hopeful, something that tells her she belongs. In that quiet moment, while the wind shifts through the leaves and faint rays of sunlight break across her tear-streaked face, he makes a silent promise to himself that he will give her the dignity she was denied for so long. Dois, not si. Her sighs as a threat, but as a story never understood. And although he knows approaching her may bring trouble from the villagers, he cannot walk away from someone who has suffered alone for so long. She watches him with wide, uncertain eyes, her breath unsteady as if she fears believing in kindness that might disappear, and he assures her softly that he wants nothing in return. He rises to his feet and offers her a small, brave smile, one that carries warmth instead of fear, and he tells her he will sew a dress for her. A real dress, a white one that holds beauty and hope, not shame. She does not speak, but the trembling in her hands begins to ease, and in that fragile shift he feels her trust forming like a single spark in the dark, a spark that will soon change everything far beyond either of them. The tailor stands before her in the quiet forest, feeling the fragile shift in the air, and she watches him with uncertain eyes. And he knows this moment demands more courage than anything he has ever done, so he moves closer with slow, careful steps, letting his voice remain steady even though his heart shakes with the weight of what he is about to say. She draws back instinctively, her giant hands tightening around the torn edges of her dress, fear flickering across her face because she cannot understand why someone so small would dare approach her without anger or insults. And for a moment, he worries she might flee deeper into the trees, where shadows can swallow her sadness again. Yet he refuses to let this fragile chance slip away. So he lifts his chin and speaks with quiet conviction, assuring her that he means no harm, that he has no reason to judge her, and that he's only come closer because he wants to offer something no one has ever given her before. Her breath catches as if his gentleness confuses her more than cruelty ever did, and he notices how she studies him as though every word he says is a puzzle she cannot solve. But her trembling slows slightly, giving him the courage to continue. The forest hums around them while he gathers the strength to speak the truth forming in his chest. And when he finally tells her he wishes to sew a white dress for her, a dress filled with purity and hope instead of shame, she freezes completely, her eyes widening with a shock so deep it seems to shake her entire frame. She steps back again, not out of anger but disbelief, her voice lost as if she cannot accept that someone might see her as worthy of beauty. And the tailor feels her confusion, pressed against him like a wall he must gently break through. He keeps his tone steady, explaining that he has watched her suffering silently, that he has witnessed the loneliness she carries, and that he wants to create something that honors her instead of diminishing her. She lowers her gaze, uncertain whether to trust him, and he notices the way her fingers loosen around the damaged cloth, as if a tiny piece of her wants to believe him despite years of isolation. He takes another step forward, slow and respectful, keeping his hands open so she can see he carries nothing but sincerity. And he tells her that everyone deserves dignity, even someone the world fears without reason. Her chest freezes with a shuddering breath, the kind that comes from holding back emotions too heavy for one heart, and he realizes she is not afraid of him hurting her but afraid of hoping he might actually mean what he says. A wind moves through the forest, stirring leaves around their feet like scattered memories, and he uses the moment to explain that a white dress is more than clothing, that it symbolizes new beginnings, something she has never been allowed to dream of, and he promises he will sew it with care, not because he pities her, but because he sees her strength buried beneath layers of silence. She lifts her head slowly, meeting his gaze with eyes that shine with unshed tears, and he feels a fierce determination growing inside him, knowing this is the moment that will shape everything that follows. He tells her she does not need to answer immediately, that he simply wants her to know she is not alone anymore, and the softness in his words seems to melt the last pieces of doubt clinging to her. She leans slightly forward, as if drowned by the warmth of his sincerity, and although she still cannot speak, he senses a quiet acceptance blooming inside her like a delicate flame in the dark. He gives a small nod, a promise of what he will create, and for the first time she does not step away from him, but stands still, letting the possibility of trust settle between them like a fragile bridge. The tailor then turns toward the village path, offering her one last gentle glance before he walks back through the trees. unaware that his simple offer has already set events in motion that will soon bring warriors, whispers, and destiny to their feet. Red slides through fabric again and again, forming long, careful lines. The tailor returns to his small workshop, with his mind racing, the giant girl's silent acceptance echoing inside him like a vow he cannot break. And as soon as he closes the wooden door behind him, he begins gathering every piece of fabric he owns, measuring each one with a trembling determination because he knows this dress must be unlike anything he has ever created. He spreads the cloth across the floor, realizing the size must be enormous. Yet instead of feeling overwhelmed, he feels an unusual strength forming inside his chest, a strength born from the memory of her hopeful eyes. He begins stitching through the night, his lantern glowing softly beside him while shadows dance across the walls. And although exhaustion presses against his shoulders, he refuses to rest because he knows she waits in the forest, trusting him without a single word. As he works, he hears distant footsteps of villagers passing outside, and panic rushes through him because he cannot let anyone see what he is creating. They would misunderstand, accuse him of helping a creature they fear, and perhaps even destroy. The fragile bond he has just formed. He quickly pulls a heavy curtain across the window, hiding the flicker of the lantern, and lowers his head again, guiding the needle through thick layers of cloth with steady hands, even as his heartbeat quickens. At every sound from the street, thread slides through fabric again and again, forming long, careful lines that resemble quiet promises woven into cotton, and each movement carries more purpose than the last, as if courage itself flows through his fingertips. Hours pass, then days, and he continues working without telling a soul, sneaking out only to buy more material from distant markets so no one notices how much cloth disappears from his shelves. The dress begins to take shape, its form stretching across the room like a symbol of hope waiting to bloom, and he often pauses to imagine how she will look, wearing something meant to honor her instead of humiliate her. Sometimes he catches himself smiling when he remembers the moment she met his gaze without stepping back, and that small memory fuels him through exhaustion that threatens to pull him down. He sews enormous sleeves with careful folds, shaping them gently so they feel soft against her skin, and he works on the flowing lower portion, ensuring it moves gracefully despite its size because he wants her to feel beautiful, not burdened. The silence of the workshop becomes a companion, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the needle-piercing cloth, the soft crackle of the lantern, and the quiet murmurs he whispers to himself whenever fear of discovery rises in his throat. Late one night, as moonlight slips through a crack in the curtain, he finally attaches the last layers, his eyes burning from sleeplessness but his heart steady with pride. The dress is enormous, yet elegant, pure white, and glowing softly in the dim light, and he steps back slowly, unable to believe that his hands created something so full of meaning. He touches the finished seams with gentle fingers, imagining the relief that will wash over her when she sees it, imagining how she might stand a little taller, no longer trying to hide behind trees. But his relief is short-lived when he hears urgent whispers outside his door, villagers discussing strange tremors near the forest and claiming the giant girl has been seen wandering alone with unusual calm, as if waiting for someone. His pulse spikes as he listens quietly, afraid that any discovery of his work might bring suspicion. But the voices fade after a moment, leaving him alone with the finished dress. He folds the massive garment carefully, knowing the path ahead will not be easy, and with a final deep breath, he blows out the lantern, determined to deliver the dress before fear, rumors, or danger can take this chance away from her. The Tay wakes before dawn, his hands still aching from nights of work, and he quietly lifts the enormous folded dress from the table, holding it close as if protecting a fragile secret that could shatter with one wrong move, then slips out of his workshop and follows the narrow path toward the forest where she waits, unseen by the waking village. The morning air feels heavy with uncertainty, yet every step he takes strengthens his resolve, for he imagines her standing alone among the trees, hoping he has not abandoned the promise he made with such trembling sincerity. When reaches the forest edge, he sees a towering silhouette hidden behind branches, her posture tense, as though fear and hope battle inside her with every breath she takes. And the moment she spots him emerging through the mist, she straightens with a quiet shock that softens when she sees the bundle in his arms. He approaches slowly, aware that this moment must unfold like a delicate whisper, not a sudden gesture. So he sets the folded dress on a smooth patch of ground and gently steps back, giving her space to understand that everything he promised, as come true. Her eyes widen as she takes in the soft white fabric, glowing faintly in the early light, and she lowers herself carefully, her huge hands trembling as she reaches toward the garment with a tenderness that contradicts her size, as if she fears she might ruin something so pure simply by touching it. He watches the hesitation in her fingers, the disbelief in her gaze, and he assures her softly that the dress is hers, made for her alone. Crafted with care she never thought she deserved, and his words seem to break something inside her because she lifts the fabric against her chest with a breath that shivers from relief. She rises slowly and steps behind the thick trees, leaving him waiting in silence, his heartbeat echoing through the forest as he wonders whether she will like what he created, whether she'll feel worthy enough to wear it, whether the world will ever let her feel anything but fear. But before doubt can consume him, the branches shift, and she emerges in the white dress, glowing like a forgotten dream brought back to life. The garment embraces her immense form with surprising grace, the long sleeves flowing gently, the folds draping beautifully from her shoulders to the forest floor. And for the first time, she does not look ragged or monstrous, but radiant, almost bridal, as though she has stepped out of a story where she has always belonged. Her breath catches with a soft sound he has never heard from her before, and when she lifts her gaze to meet his, her eyes shine with tears that escape in slow, trembling lines down her cheeks, because she cannot understand how someone could see her as beautiful, could see her as human, could see her at all without fear. The tailor feels emotion rise in his chest as he takes in the sight of her transformation, not because the dress is perfect, but because she finally stands without shrinking, without hiding, without covering herself in shame. She touches the flowing sleeves, the soft neckline, the gentle seams, and each touch feels like a silent thank you, a language she has never been allowed to use, and he feels something unspoken settle between them, delicate yet powerful, like a bridge built from trust rather than fear. She attempts a small step, then another, watching the white fabric sway gracefully around her legs, her expression shifting from disbelief to a fragile joy she can barely contain, and the forest seems to brighten around her as if recognizing the moment its quietest soul has finally been seen. She looks at him again, eyes overflowing, and although she cannot find words, he understands every emotion that trembles across her face, and he steps forward with a gentle smile, knowing this transformation is only the beginning of something far greater than either of them imagined. The forest holds its breath as she stands in the white dress, still trembling from the emotion of seeing herself transformed. But far beyond the trees, a different kind of tension begins to rise, carried by hurried voices spilling across the village, like a spreading storm. And before long, the tailor hears distant horns echoing through the hills, warning signals that make his stomach clench because he knows fear travels faster than truth. While she gently touches the soft folds of the dress, unaware of how quickly rumors twist her innocence into danger, armored men from nearby lands gather in growing numbers, convinced the giant girl is preparing for something terrible. And their marching steps shake the earth long before their silhouettes appear at the forest edge. The tailor feels the shift first, a deep vibration under his feet, and when he glances beyond the trees, he sees flashes of steel, shields, and raised banners advancing with fierce determination, and his heart begins to race because he understands they have come to attack her, not knowing she is only trying to feel human for the first time in her life. She senses his fear before she sees the threat, her eyes narrowing slightly as she follows his trembling gaze, and when she notices the approaching warriors, her body stiffens, not in anger, but in terror, the kind that freezes her to the ground, because she has spent her life running from violence she never caused. The tailor steps closer to her instinctively, placing himself between her and the approaching forces. His small frame nothing compared to her towering size, yet the courage that fills him at that moment rises higher than any blade pointed in their direction. He looks back at her, seeing how her newly found hope begins to crack under the weight of fear, and he shakes his head gently, silently begging her not to retreat into the shadows again, not to let this moment be stolen by people who never tried to understand her. As the warriors burst through the forest line with weapons lifted and armor gleaming, He walks forward with steady steps, planting his feet firmly in the grassy clearing, refusing to move even as dozens of trained men shout commands and position themselves in a tight formation meant for battle. The commander at the front raises his hand, signaling the others to halt, and although their steps stop, their anger does not, their distrust filling the air like smoke as they glare at the giant. Girl standing behind him with trembling shoulders and tearful eyes, the tailor raises his voice, louder than fear allows, telling them she is harmless, telling them she has done nothing wrong, telling them she is not a monster but someone who finally has a chance to feel seen. But the warriors only mutter warnings, among themselves, unable to believe that someone so large could ever be gentle. She takes a small step backward, her breath quickening in panic as she sees spears pointed toward her. And the tailor immediately turns, lifting both hands toward her in a calm gesture, urging her not to run because running will prove the fear they already hold. Without thinking, he steps even closer to her, pressing his back lightly against her knee in a silent message of protection, and then faces the warriors again, his voice steady despite his shaking limbs as he declares that if they want to reach her, they will have to go through him. A challenge spoken not with violence, but with unwavering loyalty. The forest seems to fall unnaturally quiet at his words, the warriors exchanging uneasy glances as they realize this young man stands alone without armor, weapon or shield, yet carries a bravery none of them expected. She watches him with widening eyes, the trembling in her hands slowly shifting from fear to a fragile disbelief that someone so small would defend her against an entire army, and a soft, trembling breath escapes her as she lowers her head, overwhelmed by the truth that he values her life more than his own. The commander steps forward, taken aback by the tailor's stance, and although tension still crackles through the air like lightning waiting to strike, something in the tailor's raw determination forces the warriors to hesitate, turning a moment of expected violence into a fragile standoff that hangs between danger and destiny. The forest holds the standoff in a tense silence, the warriors gripping their weapons while the tailor stands firm, his small frame casting a long shadow of courage across the clearing. And behind him the giant girl trembles, her fingers curling into the soft folds of the white dress as fear presses against her chest like an invisible weight she has carried her entire life. She watches the blades pointed toward her, watches the distrust in every pair of eyes staring at her, as if she is a walking threat. And the old pain she has buried begins to rise again. But when she looks down at the tailor standing bravely in front of her, something gentle breaks through her fear, pushing her to speak for the first time in a voice the world has never heard. A soft, trembling sound escapes her, enough to make the warriors shift uneasily, and then she forces her voice louder, not angry, not threatening, but fragile and honest as she tells them she never meant to frighten anyone, that she wandered, alone only because she had nowhere else to belong, and that the white dress she now wears is the first thing that has ever made her feel normal, even if only for a moment. Her words fall into the clearing like unexpected truth, shaking the air with a sincerity none of the warriors expected, and their tightly gripped weapons begin to lower just a fraction as they hear the innocence in her tone. She touches the soft sleeve of the dress with trembling fingertips, explaining in broken voice that she has lived her entire life in the shadows, hiding from people who screamed at the sight of her, and that all she ever wanted was to see herself as more than a creature, made from fear. The commander steps forward cautiously, his stern expression wavering as he listens to her speak, and the tailor takes this moment to raise his own voice again, telling the warriors that he has seen her pain, seen her loneliness, and seen the truth they refuse to understand, and that she has never harmed a single person despite how the world treated her. The warriors exchange uncertain glances, the sharpness in their eyes slowly fading as they study her in the glowing white dress, no longer seeing a monster but a girl who has suffered in silence for far too long, and the weight of their assumptions begins to crumble beneath the softness of her voice. She lowers her head, tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispers that she wore the dress because she wanted, for once, to look like someone who belongs in the world, not someone to be chased away, and the honesty in her words hits the warriors harder than any blow could. The tailor steps closer to her, placing a steady hand against her knee, a silent promise that she is no longer alone. And this simple gesture reveals more courage than any of the armed men have shown, making them realize the truth that has been In front of them all along, one of the younger warriors slowly lowers his sword completely, his voice quiet, as he admits he sees no danger in her eyes, and this small shift spreads through the group until more weapons begin to drop. Ground, not in defeat, but in understanding. The commander exhales deeply, his rigid stance softening as he looks at her again, noticing how her shoulders hunch, not with aggression, but with years of humiliation. And he finally lowers his blade as well, acknowledging that the young man's courage has broken the wall of fear they carried so blindly. She wipes her tears with the back of her hand, her breath unsteady but relieved as she watches the weapons fall. And for the first time she does not flinch at the sight of people surrounding. The Tailor stands taller, his heart pounding with both exhaustion and triumph, knowing that his voice and her truth have finally pierced through a lifetime of misunderstanding. And as the warriors step back respectfully, the clearing transforms from a battlefield into a fragile beginning of acceptance, shaped not by force but by truth, spoken in a trembling voice no one expected to hear. The commander steps aside, allowing a quiet circle to form around them as the tension fades into a breath of peace. And in that fragile stillness, the tailor turns to her with a steady warmth that softens her trembling heart, then gently reaches for her hand, promising, in a firm whisper, that she will never face the world alone again. She lowers her gaze, overwhelmed by the truth that someone chooses her not out of pity but out of devotion. And when she lifts her head, the forest glows with an unexpected joy that sweeps across the clearing like sunlight breaking through a storm. The warriors bow their heads in silent respect, witnessing a bond stronger than fear, and the trembling in her smile melts into hope as the white dress catches the light with a soft shimmer. In that moment, she is no longer a lonely giant, but a bride finding her place in a world that finally sees her,